So this lesson is all about respiration and ATP. This is the last topic in the second unit of the course. So it would be useful to have a wee think back to what you learned about on this topic in third year, particularly the burning foods experiment. So if you can't remember the burning foods experiment, then your teacher will give you the links to the videos for that. And it would be worth having a wee look before you move on to this bit. All right, so what we're going to be thinking a wee bit about today is the role of ATP, and you need to be able to state and describe the simple equation for respiration. You need to be able to explain the linking role of ATP, and we'll spend a bit of time thinking about this and thinking about some cell processes that require ATP. Another thing to think about is mitochondria. We'll come on to this in a bit more detail in one of the later lessons, but it is a structure found in plant and animal cells that you've already learned a little bit about. Okay, so the first thing is, what is respiration? And to define respiration, we need to think about what type of food is the main source of energy for living cells and what controls all chemical reactions, including respiration. So you can have a little think about that yourself. See if you can put together a sentence that would explain what respiration is. So feel free to pause the video just now, and then we'll have a wee look at the answer. So the best definition of respiration is that it is the release of energy from glucose in a living cell, and it's released in a series of enzyme-controlled reactions. So glucose is the preferred energy source for all living cells. It's not the only energy source, but it is the only one that we're really going to consider in this topic. We've already learned quite a lot about enzyme-controlled reactions, so you should be able to give a little bit of detail on how enzymes work and what it is that they do inside cells. We know that they control reactions, and respiration is a series of enzyme-controlled reactions. And this process, respiration, it takes place in every type of living cell, so animal, plant, bacterial, or fungal. Okay, so I can have a little think about what the simple equation is for aerobic respiration. You might already know this. It's kind of similar to the photosynthesis equation, but just the other way around. So have a little think about this just now. What are the raw materials in aerobic respiration? This is a key word here, aerobic. And then what's the main product and what are the waste products of respiration? So the first raw material is glucose. So that shouldn't come as too big a surprise, given what we've just said. To release the energy from glucose, we need something else to get all of the energy that we can from it. And this is where the aerobic part comes in. So think about what we need to do to stay alive. One of the things we need to do is we do need to eat to stay alive. The other main thing is we need to breathe to stay alive. And that is because we need to take in oxygen. And the oxygen is used to help release the energy from glucose. So you can think of it a little bit like a fire. If you think back to the burning foods experiment, if we want to actually release the energy from the food in that experiment, we need to set fire to it, and oxygen is needed for a fire to take place. So you can kind of think of it along those lines. Now, what we're trying to do is release that energy. So the main product is energy, but we also get two waste products. And the waste products, one of them we just get rid of, that is carbon dioxide. And the other one we can put to use, but if we've got enough of it, then we will just release that as well, and that is water. Now, if you think back to your enzymes topic, we look at word equations for a reaction, and we would normally put the name of the enzyme above the arrow. And we don't do that in this case here because there are lots of enzymes involved in aerobic respiration, not just one. So it'd be too many to try and put above there. And this is really a summary equation. Respiration actually takes place in a lot of different steps. So this is just a summary of those steps. So this is our simple equation. It's one of the things that you will need to know. Now, the energy that is produced during aerobic respiration, cells can't make use of that energy unless it's converted into a special molecule called ATP. Otherwise, if we don't do that, the energy is kind of lost. We need to store it. So we release it from our glucose, and then we need to store it in a high energy molecule called ATP. Some of the energy is lost, so you can touch your forehead and you'll feel that it's quite warm. It's warmer than the surroundings. That is energy that is being released by cells, and it's lost as heat. So we do lose some of it. However, we try and store the energy we get from this in ATP. So have a little look at this here. So we've got our aerobic respiration equation along the top. We've got our energy, and that energy is being stored in this ATP molecule. But then, what's happening here? So this is amino acids being joined together to form a protein, and you learned about that in one of the other topics, protein synthesis. So we're building up a big molecule here. In a way, we broke down a big molecule here, and we are now building up a different big molecule here. But what is the role of ATP in this diagram? What's going on? So we need to have a little think about that, because the role of ATP is really important, something that you could be asked about in an exam. And what ATP is basically doing is it is a molecule that is linking this energy releasing reaction, respiration, and this energy consuming or energy using reaction, such as protein synthesis. So ATP is providing the link here. It is effectively carrying the energy over from that respiration reaction, and it is putting it into this energy requiring reaction here. So you can pause the video just now if you like, have a wee think. Can you come up with your explanation of what is the role of ATP? Okay, so a model answer for this would be to say that ATP allows chemical energy to be transferred from one reaction to another, and that's what we're seeing. It's always transferring energy from respiration to something else. Now, it might not be protein synthesis. We'll think about some other examples later, but this is just one example. So it acts as the link between energy releasing reactions and energy consuming reactions in a cell. And in this example, it was used for protein synthesis. Okay. Now, another thing we can have a wee think about here, have a look at this. This is process A. So this is what's really going on. This is what we've just seen, respiration and something that needs energy. And ATP is acting as the link here. But process B seems a lot simpler. Why do we need that link? Why is the ATP there at all? Why don't we just channel the energy from respiration straight into this reaction that needed it? So can you think of a reason why that might be? Okay, well, a way to try and answer that question is to think about this example. Imagine that shops did not give change and you only had a £50 note, but you only needed a 1p sweet, if you can still get 1p sweets. So why would you not use the £50 note? Well, if the shop doesn't give change, then you have just lost £49.99p, all for a 1p sweet, which doesn't really make any sense. So perhaps it might be simpler in that regard to maybe not use the £50 note. Instead of using that, have lots of 1p, and you can spend them as and when you need, or perhaps pound coins or something like that. Now, it's a similar thing going on here. All of that energy that's being released from glucose, if we had this, if this is how cells worked, if we didn't have ATP, then once we've done the respiration, the energy that was needed would go into this, but huge amounts of energy would be lost because we might not need all of the energy from that to be able to achieve this. So instead, what cells do is they store the energy released from respiration in ATP, and now we can spend however many ATP we need for a particular process. And then anything that's left, we've got spare as more ATP. So this process here, this is how it worked. We would lose huge amounts of energy. So that's another reason why ATP is an important molecule linking the energy releasing reactions to the energy consuming reactions. Any spare energy that we've got left over is kept. Okay. Now, last thing to think about is what activities do cells actually require ATP for? So we've looked at one, protein synthesis, so joining amino acids together. But there's other examples as well. You can maybe have a little think about some just now. But we've got things like muscle cell contraction. So when we move, that requires energy. But if we think about that on a cellular level, when we move, it's because our muscle cells are contracting and they require ATP for that. Things like cell division requires a lot of ATP, a lot of energy, but we'll find out more about this in the next unit. Transmission of nerve impulses. So if we're sending electrical signals from our brain to other parts of the body through our nerves, that requires ATP. And one that you've already learned a little bit about, photosynthesis. This is a slightly strange one because photosynthesis does generate its own ATP for its process, but you've seen it here. We've mentioned ATP in this topic, and that the ATP that was generated in stage 1 of photosynthesis ends up being used in stage 2 of photosynthesis. And there are many, many more. Cells require ATP for pretty much any activity that you can think of. And this topic, respiration, is learning all about how it is made. And we're going to go into more detail on that in the next lesson. But that is it for this part. So hopefully this has helped explain a little bit about what ATP is and what its job is. And you should now be able to answer some questions on this topic.